The Christmas market was supposed to be magical. That's what everyone said. For Clara, it just felt loud. Everywhere she looked, there were couples laughing, holding hands as they looked at the twinkling lights. Families with kids on shoulders, pointing at the big, decorated tree in the middle of the square. The air smelled like sweet cinnamon, fried dough, and pine needles. It was a perfect postcard scene, and Clara felt completely out of place in it. Her best friend had been so excited. "You'll love him," she had said, her voice buzzing over the phone. "He's a great guy, a really good dad. He's just a bit out of practice with dating." Clara had agreed because saying no felt harder. Now, standing by the entrance, clutching her purse, she wished she had stayed home with her tea and her book. She saw him before he saw her. He looked like his picture, kind eyes a little tired around the edges. He was looking around, and when his eyes landed on her, he gave a small, tight smile and waved. He was holding 2 cups of something steaming. "Clara? Hi, I'm Mark. I got us some cider." He handed her a cup. His fingers were cold. "Thank you," she said, taking it. The warmth seeped through the paper cup into her gloves. The first few minutes were the usual awkward dance. "How was your trip? Where do you work? The market is busy, isn't it?" They walked slowly past stalls selling wooden toys and knitted hats. Mark's answers were short, polite, but his mind seemed somewhere else. He checked his phone 3 times in the first 10 minutes, always turning the screen away quickly. "So, your friend tells me you have a daughter," Clara said, trying to find a topic that would light him up. "Yeah. Lily. She's 5. A real smile touched his lips for a second, then faded. "She's with a sitter. First time with this new one, actually." "Oh, I hope it's going okay," Clara said. "He should have texted by now," Mark murmured, more to himself than to her. He looked at his phone again, then shoved it back into his pocket. The conversation kept hitting dead ends. Clara would ask a question, he'd give a 1 or 2-word answer, and then there would be a heavy silence. She tried to talk about her job at the library, about a funny book she'd recently read, but his nods felt automatic. He wasn't rude, not exactly. He was just not there. It felt like she was talking to a very polite wall. They stopped near a stall full of shiny, hand-blown glass ornaments. They were beautiful, catching the fairy lights. Clara picked up one shaped like a tiny snowman. "These are incredible." "Yeah, really nice," Mark said, but he was looking past her, scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking at the ornaments or at her. He was looking at the people walking by, his shoulders stiff. Clara felt a knot of disappointment tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just awkward first-date jitters. This was a man who clearly did not want to be here. She put the snowman back carefully. They walked under a wooden arch draped with green leaves and white berries. Mistletoe. Couple ahead of them saw it, giggled, and shared a quick kiss. Mark saw it too and stopped walking, so suddenly Clara almost bumped into him. He turned to her. The noise of the market, the carols, the chatter, seemed to fade for a moment. His face was painfully apologetic. "Clara," he started, then sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, you seem really great. You're smart, you're kind. This isn't about you." The knot in her stomach turned to ice. She knew what was coming. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I thought I was ready for this, but I'm not. I'm not feeling a connection, and I'm worried about my kid. The sitter hasn't checked in. I need to go." He said it all in a rush, like ripping off a bandage. "Merry Christmas," he added, the words sounding hollow and strange, and then he was gone. He just turned and walked away, his dark coat disappearing into a sea of other dark coats. Clara stood frozen under the mistletoe. Heat rushed to her cheeks, a burning mix of embarrassment and hurt. People flowed around her, a river of Christmas cheer she wasn't part of. "You're lovely, Clara, but I'm just not feeling a connection." The words echoed in her head. He hadn't even given it a chance. 45 minutes. That was all she was worth. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall here, in the middle of everything. She needed to get out of this crowd. She turned, not seeing the lights or the stalls anymore, and walked quickly towards the edge of the market square. Away from the music and the laughter, she found a quiet bench tucked near the old, silent carousel. The painted horses were still, frozen in their gallop. She sat down, the cold from the wooden slats seeping through her coat. She took a deep, shaky breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. It's fine, she told herself. Just one bad date. It doesn't mean anything. But it felt like it meant something. It felt like a confirmation of a quiet fear she carried, that she was meant to be on the sidelines, watching other people's happiness, but never quite having her own. She watched a little boy beg his father for a ride on the carousel. His face lit up with pure joy. She looked away. That's when she saw the little girl, on the next bench over, all by herself. A small bundle in a puffy blue coat that looked almost too big for her. She was sitting perfectly straight, her hands in her lap, clutching a stuffed reindeer that had seen better days. One of its antlers was bent. Clara looked around for a parent, a guardian, anyone. But the people nearby were all in their own groups. No one was looking at this little girl. The child wasn't crying. She was just sitting there, still as a statue, but her eyes were wide, moving back and forth across the crowd like a lost sailor searching for land. Clara's own misery was suddenly shoved aside by a sharp, protective worry. This was wrong. A child this small should not be alone. She watched for another minute, hoping to see a frantic mother or father come rushing up. No one came. The little girl's bottom lip began to quiver. She pulled the stuffed reindeer closer to her face. That was it. Clara stood up and walked slowly over to the other bench. She didn't want to scare her. She knelt down a little distance away, so she wasn't towering over her. "Hey there," Clara said softly, giving her a gentle smile. "Are you okay?" The little girl looked at her. Her eyes were big and brown, and now they were filling with tears that spilled over and made clean tracks down her pink cheeks. She shook her head. "Are you here with someone?" Clara asked. The girl nodded. "My daddy," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I lost him." "Okay," Clara said, keeping her voice calm and steady, even though her heart was beating faster. "That's okay. We can find him. My name is Clara." "What's your name?" The girl sniffled. "Lily." "Well, Lily, I bet your daddy is looking for you right now. Let's go to the people who can help, okay? We'll tell them your name, and they'll make an announcement." Lily looked unsure, her small fingers tightening around her reindeer. Clara held out her hand, not demanding, just offering. "You can hold my hand if you want. We'll stay together." Lily hesitated for a second longer, then slid off the bench and put her small, mittened hand into Clara's. Her grip was surprisingly tight. In that moment, Clara's terrible, rejected Christmas date didn't matter at all. All that mattered was this small, cold hand in hers, and the need to get her safely back to where she belonged. Lily's hand in hers was a small, grounding weight. The feel of the fuzzy mitten, the tight, trusting grip. It pushed the last of Clara's own hurt into a far corner of her mind. Right now, there was only this. A lost little girl in a sea of strange adults. "Okay, Lily," Clara said, keeping her voice as gentle as the snow beginning to dust their shoulders. "I saw an information booth near the big tree. That's where the helpers are. They'll know what to do." Lily just nodded, pressing her stuffed reindeer against her cheek. She walked close to Clara's side, her steps small and quick to keep up. Clara slowed her pace, weaving through the crowd, careful not to let anyone bump into the child. The information booth was a small, brightly lit hut with a kind-looking older woman inside, her glasses on a chain. Clara approached, giving Lily's hand a little squeeze of reassurance. "Hi, excuse me," Clara said, leaning in. "We've found a lost little girl. This is Lily. She's looking for her dad." The woman's expression shifted instantly from cheerful helper to one of gentle, practiced concern. She bent down, her voice softening. "Hello, sweetheart. What's your daddy's name?" Lily's eyes went wide and she shook her head, burying her face in her reindeer's fur. She whispered something too quiet to hear. "It's okay," Clara said, crouching down next to her. You can tell us. It'll help us find him faster. Lily peeked out. Just, Daddy, she whispered. The volunteer gave Clara a sympathetic look. Happens all the time. Don't you worry, honey. We'll get you sorted. She picked up a small microphone. A tinny chime echoed through the market speakers, followed by her calm voice. Attention, please. We have a little girl named Lily at the information booth. She's looking for her daddy. She's 5 years old, wearing a blue coat and holding a reindeer toy. Please come to the information booth if you're looking for Lily. The announcement played twice. Clara stood with Lily just outside the booth, watching the crowds. People glanced over, smiled sympathetically, but kept moving. No one came rushing forward. With each passing second, Lily's hand seemed to grow heavier in Clara's, and the girl's small body pressed a little closer to her leg. It might take a minute, Lily, Clara said, trying to sound confident. It's a really big place. Lily just nodded, her eyes never stopping their search. A few more minutes ticked by. The volunteer made the announcement again. Still nothing. The first flicker of real worry started in Clara's chest. What if he wasn't here anymore? What if he'd left? She saw the same fear starting to cloud Lily's face. The child wasn't crying, but her breath was coming in little shaky puffs in the cold air. Tell you what, Clara said, forcing a cheerful note into her voice. It's cold out here. How about we get a hot chocolate while we wait? We can stand right here where your daddy can see us. Lily considered this, then gave a tiny nod. Clara bought 2 cups from a nearby stall, making sure Lily's wasn't too hot. They stood near a big, warm-looking lamp-post, sipping the sweet, creamy drink. The simple act seemed to calm Lily a little. So, Clara said, does your reindeer have a name? Tinsel, Lily said softly, her voice a bit clearer now. That's a perfect Christmas name, Clara smiled. He looks like a very good friend. He is. He helps me not be scared. Lily took a sip, leaving a little chocolate mustache on her upper lip. Are you scared? The question was so simple and direct. Clara thought about it. You know, she said, I was feeling a little sad before I met you, but helping someone, that's a really good way to not feel scared or sad anymore. So thank you for letting me help. Lily seemed to think this was a good answer. She leaned against Clara's side, not in a clingy way, but in a way that felt natural, like they were sharing the lamp-post's warmth to pass the time. Clara started pointing out funny things in the crowd. Look at that big dog wearing the reindeer antlers, she said. Lily giggled, a sweet, bell-like sound. Oh, and see that man trying to carry like 10 gingerbread houses? He's going to drop them. Lily's giggles grew. She started pointing out things too. A lady with a sparkly hat, a baby asleep in a stroller covered in lights. They made up a little game, giving silly stories to the people who walked by. The grumpy-looking man was grumpy because he wanted caramel on his popcorn, but they'd run out. The laughing teenagers were laughing because one of them had just slipped on a tiny bit of ice. For those moments, the anxiety of waiting lifted. It was just 2 people, one big and one small, sharing hot chocolate and silly stories on a cold night. Clara felt a surprising warmth spreading through her, one that had nothing to do with the drink. This little girl, in her quiet bravery, was pulling Clara out of her own head. But then, a few minutes later, Lily's smile faded. She scanned the crowd once more, her lower lip trembling again. He's not coming, she whispered, the words full of a despair that seemed too big for her small frame. Yes, he is, Clara said firmly, with a conviction she didn't fully feel. She crouched down again, looking Lily right in the eyes. I promise you, Lily, he is looking for you. Daddies don't stop looking. Maybe he's just in a part of the market where he can't hear the speaker. Maybe he went to get the car and thought you were with a friend. But he will come back for you. I know it. She wasn't just saying it to comfort the child. She was saying it because she believed it to be true. The man who had been her date might have been distant and rude, but the way he'd mentioned his daughter, that tiny, real smile, showed a different person underneath. Just then, the volunteer came out of the booth, her face kind but serious. We've made the announcement several times, dear. The next step is to call the local police. They can help. They're very good at this. Police. The word sent a chill through Clara that had nothing to do with the weather. She looked at Lily's terrified face. Just a little longer? Clara asked, her voice pleading. Please? Maybe we can walk around the main paths once, slowly. She can look for him. I'll stay with her the whole time. The volunteer looked at the two of them, the young woman holding the little girl's hand like a lifeline, and nodded. All right, 15 more minutes. Stay near the main square where it's bright. Then we need to make the call. Thank you, Clara said. She looked down at Lily. You hear that? We're going on a daddy hunting mission. You have the best eyes. You tell me if you see him. Okay? Lily nodded, her grip on both Clara's hand and tinsel tightening with new purpose. They started a slow walk around the perimeter of the bustling square. Clara let Lily set the pace, which was a slow, searching walk with lots of stops to peer at faces. They passed the ornament stall where Clara had been earlier. They passed the mistletoe arch. Clara didn't even glance at it. Lily was quiet, her eyes sharp and focused. Every so often, she'd see a man in a dark coat and her body would tense with hope, then relax as the man turned and it wasn't her father. Each time, Clara felt a little piece of her own hope chip away. They were passing the carousel again when Lily suddenly froze. Her whole body went stiff. She wasn't looking at the carousel, though. She was staring across the square, towards the dark, quiet street that led to the parking lot. Clara followed her gaze. First, she saw nothing. Then, a figure emerged from the shadow between two buildings. A man, running. Not a jog, but a frantic, desperate sprint, his coat flapping behind him. He was heading straight for the information booth. Lily's breath caught. She didn't shout. She didn't wave. She just stood there, perfectly still, as if moving might break the spell. The man skidded to a halt at the booth, his hands braced on the counter as he talked wildly to the volunteer inside. Even from this distance, Clara could see the panic in the way he stood, in the way he raked his hands through his hair. The volunteer pointed. The man turned. His eyes swept the square, wild and scared, and then they landed on the small figure in blue by the carousel. The change in his face was instant and total. The terror shattered, replaced by a flood of raw, overwhelming relief. It was a look so powerful it crossed the distance between them and hit Clara right in the heart. Daddy! The word finally burst from Lily, a choked, happy cry. He was already moving, sprinting again, weaving through the crowd. People jumped out of his way. He didn't seem to see any of them. He only saw his daughter. He reached them and dropped to his knees on the cold pavement, not caring, his arms opening wide. Lily let go of Clara's hand and flew into them, burying her face in his coat. He wrapped her up so tightly, as if he could pull her right inside his chest to keep her safe forever. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Silent, heavy sobs of relief. Oh, Lilybug. Oh, my baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He choked out, his voice muffled against her hat. He kept saying it, rocking her back and forth. I've got you. I've got you. Clara stood a few steps back, her own eyes stinging. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the cold again. She was an observer of this intensely private, beautiful moment. A stranger who had, for a little while, been the keeper of something precious. The man held Lily for a long time, until her own little hiccuping cries subsided. Finally, he pulled back just enough to look at her face, wiping her tears with his thumbs. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Lily shook her head, clutching tinsel between them. I was with Clara, she said, her small thumb pointing over her shoulder. She got me hot chocolate. The man's eyes, still wet with tears, lifted from his daughter's face and found Clara's, and in that instant, the world shifted. The relief in his eyes froze, then shattered into a confusion so deep it was almost physical. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was him. The man from the date. Mark. He stared at her, and Clara stared back. The warmth she'd felt just seconds ago washing away in a wave of cold, sharp shock. The kind, Frantic father on his knees in the snow was the same man who had left her under the mistletoe with empty, polite words. The same man. All along, it had been the same man. For a long moment, the only sounds were the distant Christmas carols and the hum of the crowd. The world seemed to shrink down to just the three of them by the silent carousel. The snow fell in soft, slow flakes, catching in his hair and on the shoulders of her coat. That he was still on his knees, holding Lily tight, but his eyes were locked on Clara. The shock on his face turned into something else, a deep, gut-punching shame. He looked down at the ground, then back up at her, his mouth working as if he was trying to find words that had all blown away. Clara felt her own face grow warm. All the embarrassment from earlier came rushing back, mixed now with a strange, twisting feeling. The man who had been so cold to her was this same person who was crying with relief in the snow. It didn't make sense. It was like two different people. Lily, sensing the heavy silence, squirmed in his arms. "Daddy, this is Clara. She was nice. She stayed with me." That seemed to break the spell. He slowly, carefully, got to his feet, lifting Lily up to settle on his hip. She clung to him, her arms around his neck. He cleared his throat, his voice rough from crying. "Clara," he said. Her name sounded completely different in his mouth now. Not a polite date's name, but a lifeline. You found her." It wasn't a question. It was a statement full of awe and disbelief. Clara nodded, not trusting her own voice. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. He stopped, shaking his head. He looked utterly wrecked. The tiredness she'd seen earlier was now a deep exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't. It's not enough." "She was very brave," Clara said softly, looking at Lily, who had rested her head on her father's shoulder. "She just sat down and waited, like someone smart had told her to do." A flicker of pain crossed his face. "We practiced it," he said, his voice low. "If you get lost, find a bench and stay put. Don't talk to strangers unless it's a helper." He looked at Clara, his expression so complicated. "But you weren't a helper." "I was just someone sitting on the next bench," Clara said with a small shrug. It was the truth. The volunteer from the information booth came bustling over, her face bright with relief. "Oh, wonderful. You found each other. See, Lily, I told you your daddy was looking." The man turned to her, his gratitude spilling over. "Thank you for your help. Thank you so much." "It was this young lady who did the real work," the volunteer said, smiling warmly at Clara. "She stayed right with her, kept her calm. You've got a good one there." She gave Clara a knowing nod, patted Lily's back, and headed back to her booth, clearly pleased with the happy ending. Her words hung in the air. "You've got a good one there." The awkwardness returned, thick and uncomfortable. He shifted Lily's weight on his hip. Can I buy you a coffee or something?" he asked, the words tumbling out. "I feel like I need to explain, and I need to sit down. My legs are still shaking." Clara hesitated. The last thing she wanted was another strained, awful conversation with this man. But Lily was looking at her with those big, hopeful eyes. And the truth was, Clara was freezing, and the idea of just turning and walking away into the night felt strangely wrong now. She had been part of this little drama, and she felt she needed to see it through to its proper end. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just for a minute." There was a small, quiet cafe on the edge of the market square, one that was mostly empty now. He ordered a black coffee, his hands visibly trembling as he handed over the money. Clara asked for a tea. They sat at a small wooden table in the corner. Lily, who seemed suddenly very sleepy now that the adventure was over, curled up in the chair next to her father, hugging Tinsel and sipping on a small cup of warm milk he'd gotten for her. For a few minutes, they just sat in silence. He stared into his coffee cup as if the dark liquid held the answers. Clara blew on her tea, the steam warming her face. Finally, he spoke, his voice so low she had to lean forward to hear. "What I said to you earlier, under the mistletoe." He couldn't even look at her. He looked at his daughter, asleep now with her cheek pressed against the wooden chair back. It was the worst thing I've ever done. The most cowardly. It wasn't true. Clara stayed quiet, letting him find the words that he took a sharp, ragged breath. The sitter, it was her first time with us. She's a neighbor's kid. Right after I left you, my phone buzzed. It was her. She was crying, saying there was a family emergency, that she had to leave right away. She said she'd wait until I got back. He ran a hand over his face. I panicked. I just started running for the car. I was so focused on getting home, I didn't even think. His eyes finally lifted to meet Clara's. They were full of a raw honesty that had been completely absent before. I got home. The door was unlocked. The house was empty. She'd left a note saying she was so sorry. She'd had to go. And Lily was gone. The memory of that terror was fresh in his eyes. Clara could see it, and she felt a cold knot of fear for him even now. I lost my mind, he whispered, glancing at his sleeping daughter. I called the police. I was running through the neighborhood screaming her name. Then one of the other neighbors came out. She said she'd seen Lily, maybe 20 minutes before, walking down the sidewalk toward the main road, toward the market. He took a gulp of his coffee, wincing as it burned his throat. She must have followed me. She loves the lights. She probably thought she could catch up. I drove back here like a crazy person. I've been running through this market for what felt like hours. I thought the worst things you can possibly think. His voice broke. He pressed his lips together hard to keep them from trembling. And then I saw her. With you. He looked at Clara, his gaze intense. You were the last person I expected to see. The very last person. When I saw her hand in yours, I can't explain it. It was like the whole world broke apart and then put itself back together all at once. Clara looked down at her tea. The pieces were falling into place. The distracted behavior, the constant phone checks, the need to leave. It wasn't about her. Not really. It was about a man stretched so thin with worry and responsibility that he had nothing left to give to a stranger. Why did you say it then? She asked, her own voice quiet. If you were worried, why not just say, I'm sorry, my sitter called. There's an emergency? He let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. Because I'm an idiot. Because the truth is even more pathetic. He finally held her gaze, not flinching away. I haven't been on a date since my wife passed away. It's been 3 years. My friend set this up, and I said yes because everyone tells me I need to move on. Get out there. But the whole time I was talking to you, all I could think was, what am I doing? What if Lily likes her? What if she likes Lily, and then it doesn't work out? How could I put her through another loss? He shook his head, disgusted with himself. I got scared, terrified, so I did the thing that would guarantee it would be over. I was rude, and I left. It was easier that way. A clean cut. I thought I could just be a jerk, and that would be that, and I could go back to my safe, quiet life where the only heart I have to worry about is hers. He reached over and gently smoothed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. But then life showed me how stupid that was, he continued. The one thing I was trying so hard to protect was the very thing I almost lost because I was too busy being scared and trying to make a clean cut. And the person who kept her safe was you. The cafe was quiet. The Christmas music from outside was just a faint hum. Clara didn't know what to say. All her anger from earlier was gone. It was impossible to be angry at this exhausted, honest man holding his sleeping child. She felt a wave of pity, but also a deep respect. His love for his daughter wasn't just words. It was a desperate, driving force that had led him to make a mess of everything else. You don't have to explain anymore, Clara said softly. I understand. But I want to, he said. You deserve that. You were kind to me when I didn't deserve it, and you were an angel to my daughter. I need you to know that the guy on that bench with you, that's not who I am. Or, it's a part of me I hate, but it's not the whole story. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something. They both fell silent, watching her. In the soft light of the cafe, with her guard down and his heart cracked open, The strange night felt like it was settling into something real. The awkward blind date was a distant memory. This here, the confession, the sleeping child, the shared relief. This was real life, messy and complicated and raw. He finished his coffee. I should get her home to a proper bed. Clara nodded, gathering her things. Of course. He carefully bundled Lily up, lifting her so her head rested on his shoulder. She barely woke up, just sighed and snuggled in. They walked out of the cafe together into the cold night. The market was starting to close down, the lights twinkling off one by one. They walked in silence toward the parking lot, the snow crunching under their feet. When they reached his car, an old sedan littered with crumbs and a few kids' books, he turned to her. He looked like he wanted to say 100 more things, but in the end, he just said, "Thank you, Clara, for everything. I'll never forget this." "You're welcome," she said, and she meant it. "Just get her home safe." He nodded, a promise. He opened the car door and began the careful process of buckling his sleeping daughter into her car seat. Clara watched for a moment, then turned to walk to her own car, the night feeling both emptier and fuller than when it had begun. The week between Christmas and New Year's always felt like a strange, quiet pocket of time. The world seemed to pause to take a breath. For Clara, it was usually a time for reading, for long walks, for thinking about the year that was ending. This year, her thoughts kept circling back to that night at the market. Not to the rejection under the mistletoe, but to everything that came after. The feel of Lily's small mittened hand, the hot chocolate mustache on her lip, the raw, shattered look on her father's face when he finally found them, his confession in the quiet cafe. She thought about it while shelving books at the library, the old, familiar smell of paper and dust around her. She thought about it while making dinner in her quiet apartment. The image of him, kneeling in the snow, holding his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. It wouldn't leave her. It was confusing. She had no reason to ever think of him again. That chapter, by all rights, was closed. It was a weird, bad date with a strange, beautiful ending. End of story. But it didn't feel closed on New Year's Eve morning. She was putting away her groceries when her phone buzzed. It was a text from her best friend, the one who had set up the date. "Okay.
Spill.
I ran into Mark at the pharmacy yesterday. He looked like he'd seen a ghost when I mentioned your name. He said, 'Please tell her I'm so sorry again. What on earth happened after I left you guys?' All he said was that it didn't go as planned, and that you were amazing." Clara stared at the message. She hadn't given her friend the full story. She just said the date was a dud and left it at that. She sat down at her kitchen table, her fingers hovering over the screen. What could she even say? "Well, he ditched me. Then I found his lost daughter, and he cried in front of me." It sounded like a movie, not real life. She typed back a simplified version. "It was just a weird night. His kid got lost at the market and I happened to be the one who found her. It was a whole thing. He was just embarrassed. That's all." The reply was instant. "His kid got lost. And you found her. Clara, that's huge. No wonder he looked so shaken up. He probably thinks you hate him." Clara didn't answer. Did she hate him? No. She didn't know him enough to hate him. She pitied him. She was annoyed by him. She was curious about him. Later that afternoon, another text came. Not from her friend. This one was from an unknown number. "Clara, it's Mark. I got your number from our friend. I hope that's okay. I won't bother you. I just wanted to give you this. Lily drew it for you." Picture followed. It was a child's drawing, done with bright crayons. There were 3 stick figures. A big one in blue with scribbly yellow hair, Lily, she guessed, a medium one in black, him, and a taller one in a green dress with brown hair, her. They were all holding hands. Above them was a lopsided yellow circle that was probably the sun, or maybe a street lamp. In shaky, capital letters at the top, it said, "Thank you, Clara." A sudden, unexpected lump formed in Clara's throat. She looked at the picture for a long time. The careful, clumsy lines. The fact that Lily had included her. That she had remembered her name, or tried to spell it. She didn't know what to do. She didn't reply, Putting the phone down felt rude, but what was she supposed to say? Nice drawing? That felt wrong, too. The picture stayed on her phone. She looked at it a few more times that day. As evening fell on New Year's Eve, the quiet of her apartment felt heavier than usual. She could hear parties starting in other buildings, laughter and music drifting through the cold air. She had plans to watch a movie and be asleep by 10. That was her tradition. At a 7:45. Her phone buzzed again. It was him. I'm sorry to text again. I'm just dropping off something at your door. It's from Lily. No need to answer or come out. I'm leaving now. Clara's heart gave a funny little jump. She walked to her front door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. She slowly opened the door. Sitting on the mat was a small, gift-wrapped box with reindeer on the paper. Taped to it was a folded piece of paper. She brought it inside, her pulse humming in her ears. She opened the note first. It was in an adult's handwriting, neat but hurried. Clara, Lily would not let the new year start without giving you this. She insisted you needed it more than she did. It's a thank you present. No strings attached. I am so sorry for all the trouble. Mark and Lily? Clara carefully unwrapped the box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the little glass snowman ornament. The one she had picked up at the market stall right before he left her. She held it up, the glass catching the light from her lamp. It was delicate, beautiful, and it felt incredibly significant that he had gone back. He had gone back to that stall, remembered which one she had looked at, and bought it. For her. This wasn't just an apology anymore. This was a gesture. A quiet, observant, deeply thoughtful gesture. The man who had been too distracted to look at her in the market had remembered the exact ornament that had caught her eye. She sat on her couch, holding the cool glass snowman in her hand. The silence of her apartment was now a different kind of quiet. It wasn't empty. It was full of questions. Before she could think too hard, she picked up her phone. She typed a message, deleted it, then typed another. Thank you for the ornament. It's beautiful. And please tell Lily I love her drawing. It's on my fridge. She hit send. Her hands felt a little shaky. The reply came a few minutes later. She will be so happy to hear that. Thank you for telling her. She's been talking about you. There was a pause. Then another message appeared. I know it's the worst night to ask, and you are absolutely entitled to say no, or to just ignore this. But if you aren't busy, and if you might be willing to let me try again, I could make us some terrible, non-alcoholic punch. Lily is having a midnight party at 7:30 with her grandparents on video call. I could be free after that, just for an hour, to talk. As a real person this time, not a scared idiot. Clara read it twice. A New Year's Eve invitation. Not to a party but to terrible punch and a talk. From a man who had seen her at her most kind and his most broken. There was no pretense left. No blind date mystery. It was the most honest, awkward, and real invitation she had ever received. She thought about her quiet movie, her early bedtime, the safe, predictable end to her year. Then she thought about the drawing on her fridge, the snowman in her hand, the look on his face when he said, "The guy on that bench with you. That's not who I am." Maybe it was the time of year, a time for new beginnings. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Or maybe it was the memory of a little girl's hand trustingly placed in hers. She took a deep breath. What kind of terrible punch are we talking about? The 3 dots appeared immediately, dancing on her screen. The kind from a powder mix that turns your tongue blue. I'm not a good cook. A small smile touched her lips. I can be there at 8:15, just for a little while. And I'm driving myself. She added the last part to set a boundary, for herself as much as for him. His reply was fast. Understood. I'll text you the address. And Clara, thank you, just for considering it. At 8:10, Clara stood in front of her mirror, arguing with herself. This was a bad idea. This was a weird, complicated, potentially messy bad idea. She was going to the house of a man who had already rejected her once, to drink blue punch. But she also knew that the man who had rejected her on a blind date was not the same man who had bought her the snowman. And she wanted to meet the man who did that. She put on a simple sweater and jeans, drove across town, and found herself in a quiet, modest neighborhood. His house was at the end of a cul-de-sac with a single light on in the living room window and a bike with training wheels on the front porch. She sat in her car for a full minute watching the light. Then she got out, walked up the path, and before she could lose her nerve, she knocked on the door that IT opened almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting right there. He was dressed casually, in a simple gray shirt and jeans. He looked more rested than he had at the market, but there was still a nervousness in his eyes. "Hi," he said, stepping back to let her in. "Hi," she said, stepping inside. The house was warm and lived in. It was a little cluttered. There were toys in a bin by the sofa, drawings taped to the wall, a small, lopsided Christmas tree still twinkling in the corner. It smelled like clean laundry and the faint, sweet scent of child's shampoo. It felt like a home. On the coffee table were 2 glasses and a pitcher filled with a liquid that was, indeed, a vibrant, electric blue. He saw her looking at it and winced. "I told you, it's historically bad." Clara smiled, a real, genuine smile. "It's a very bold color." He let out a short, relieved laugh. "Can I take your coat?" And just like that, they began again. Not on a crowded street with expectations, but in a quiet living room with blue punch and a second chance that felt, for the first time, like it was starting in the right place. The blue punch was, as promised, terrible. It was too sweet and had a faint, chemical aftertaste. Clara took one polite sip and set her glass down on the coffee table, next to a stack of picture books. He saw her reaction and laughed, a real, unguarded sound she hadn't heard before. "I warned you. I can make coffee instead. It won't be blue, but I can't promise it'll be good." "Coffee would be great," Clara said, smiling. While he busied himself in the small, brightly lit kitchen, she let herself look around the room. It was different from her neat, quiet apartment. This room was full of life. Crayon drawings were taped to the walls with care. A small tent made of blankets was draped over 2 chairs in the corner. A well-loved teddy bear sat propped on the sofa. It was a little messy, but it was a warm, happy kind of mess. It felt like a place where people lived and laughed and loved. He came back with 2 mugs of coffee. "Here, probably safer." They sat on opposite ends of the sofa. The first few minutes were quiet, but it wasn't the strained, awful silence from the market. It was the quiet of 2 people figuring out where to start. "She's asleep," Clara asked, nodding toward the hallway. "Out like a light." The midnight party with her grandparents was a big success. They did a countdown with sparkling apple juice at 7:30. "She thinks she stayed up incredibly late." He smiled, a soft, proud smile that transformed his face. "Thank you again for the picture. She asked me 5 times today if I thought you got it." "I really did love it," Clara said, and meant it. "It's the first thing on my fridge." He looked down into his coffee mug, his expression turning serious. "Clara, I need to say one more thing, and then I promise I'll stop apologizing. When I asked you here tonight, I'm not asking for another chance in the way you probably think. I'm not ready to date. I see that now. What I did to you at the market proved that. I'm a mess when it comes to that stuff." He took a breath, gathering his thoughts. "I asked you here because I owed you a real conversation. With the real me, not the scared guy pretending or the panicked dad. Just me. And because Lily drew you in our family picture. And in her mind, that makes you a friend. And I wanted to honor that." It was the most straightforward thing anyone had ever said to her. There were no games, no lines, just the honest, complicated truth. "I appreciate that," Clara said softly. "And for what it's worth, I think I understand the scared guy, too. I can't imagine how hard it must be." He nodded, gratitude in his eyes. They started to talk. Not the stiff interview of a first date, but a real, meandering conversation. He told her about his work as a graphic designer, how he mostly did it from home so he could be there for Lily. He talked about his wife, not with a wall of grief around the topic, but with simple, fond memories, how she could never keep a plant alive, how she hated the taste of mint, how she used to sing off-key in the car. Clara talked about the library, about her love for old, forgotten books, about the quiet peace of the stacks. She told him about growing up as an only child, about how she'd always loved the calm after Christmas. They talked about silly things, too, the worst gifts they'd ever received, their most embarrassing childhood memories. He told her about the time Lily tried to give the cat a bath in her wading pool. Clara laughed until her sides hurt. At one point, a faint chime came from a clock in the hallway. Clara glanced at her watch. It was almost 10 o'clock. She had been there for over an hour and a half. It felt like 20 minutes. "I should probably go," she said, but there was no urgency in her voice. "Of course," he said, but he didn't move to get up either. They sat for another moment in the comfortable quiet. Then, from down the hall, a small voice called out, "Daddy!" He sighed, a fond, exasperated sound. "That's the first call. There will be 2 more for water, and one about a shadow that looks like a dragon." He stood up. "Do you mind if I—" Go," Clara said, waving him off. She listened as he walked down the hall. His voice was a soft, comforting murmur. She couldn't hear the words, just the tone. It was the same tone he'd used when he finally held Lily at the market, full of pure, unwavering love. She stood up and walked over to the bookshelf, looking at the framed photos. There was one of a younger, happier him with a smiling woman with kind eyes, Lily's mother. There were dozens of Lily, from a bald baby to a gap-toothed 5-year-old. It was a story of a family, a story of love and loss and continuing on. He came back into the room, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry. The dragon shadow has been vanquished with a nightlight." "A hero's work," Clara smiled. She picked up her coat from the arm of the sofa. He walked her to the door. The easy warmth of the living room met the crisp cold of the night. They stood on the front step, the light from the house painting a golden rectangle on the snowy path. "Thank you for coming," he said. His hands were in his pockets. "And for everything. Really. Thank you for the coffee," Clara said. "And the conversation. It was nice." They looked at each other. The air between them wasn't charged with romance. It was something else. A deep respect. A hard-won understanding. A fragile, brand-new friendship that felt solid because it was built on truth, not pretense. "I'd like to be your friend, Clara," he said, the words clear in the cold air. "If that's something you'd want. I know it's unconventional, and it comes with a very talkative, drawing-obsessed 5-year-old attached." Clara thought about her quiet fridge, soon to have a new picture on it. She thought about the glass snowman sitting on her kitchen table at home. She thought about how the loneliest night of her year had somehow led her here, to this warm, cluttered house full of love. "I'd like that," she said, and for the first time all night, she saw the last bit of tension leave his shoulders. He looked peaceful. "Good," he said, a simple, happy word. She walked to her car. As she pulled away, she saw him still standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the warm light, watching until she turned the corner. The next morning, New Year's Day, Clara woke up late. Sunlight streamed into her apartment. She made tea and stood in her kitchen, looking at Lily's drawing on the fridge. She smiled. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture from him. It was Lily, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess, holding up a new drawing. This one had 4 stick figures, the same 3 from before, and now a smaller, 4-legged scribble of orange next to them. At the bottom, it said in his handwriting, "She says this is you, me, Lily, and our cat, Mango. Welcome to the crew, friend." Clara didn't overthink it. She took a picture of her own kitchen window, where the little glass snowman now hung, catching the morning light. She sent it with a caption, "He found a good home. Tell the crew Happy New Year." The reply came quickly, "We will. Happy New Year, Clara." It wasn't a grand romance. It wasn't a dramatic story of love at first sight. It was something smaller and maybe because of that, something stronger. It was a story that began with a rejection and a lost child, and became a story about found things. A found friendship, a found piece of a family, a found sense of connection on a cold night. Clara knew there were no guarantees. Friendship could be complicated. Life could be messy. But as she sipped her tea in the quiet of the new year, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. She had gone on a blind date hoping for a spark, and instead, she had been given a hand to hold in the dark. And sometimes that was the better gift.